Oh, there she is. Okay, good.
I made it.
You made it. I wonder, I hope nobody else got the wrong link though. Do you know where that link is, Jennifer?
It was in my calendar. Only Jenny Gitlitz, who was gonna tune in, is the only person I sent it to. So I can just,
She's here. She's here.
oh, she is good. Okay.
Good. Okay.
I'm
Awesome.
so sorry.
I think everybody got the right. I like triple checked the link every time I emailed it, and wherever I see it, I like always check the last 4 digits of the meeting ID, but things happen.
Yeah. For sure.
Christina, would you mind watching the waiting room while I get the meeting started?
Sure.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to the monthly local groups and affiliates meeting. My name is Alexis Goldsmith, and I'm the organizing director with Beyond Plastics. We have a lot of our staff on the call tonight because this is a big meeting, and we are going to be talking a lot about policy solutions to some of the most urgent plastic pollution issues that we're facing this year in the state, local, and federal spheres of government. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization or your local group, and your pronouns and where you're located. If this is your first meeting, welcome. We're going to run through a few housekeeping items for new members, and then we're going to dive right into the issue and policy retreat. So first of all,
can you just pause for a second? Am I co-host? Because I'm not seeing stuff pop up.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Let's make sure everybody's who's in the waiting room comes in.
Got him.
Okay, so quick housekeeping items. If this is your first meeting, welcome. So we have a few tools to participate in the local groups and affiliates. The first is we have an event calendar that lives on our website, and you can add any events that your group is doing to that calendar. And that's just so the public who is going to our website can see your events, and maybe if they're in the area or if it's online, they can attend. We have a Slack channel as well. Slack is totally optional, but we love it for communicating outside of email. It's kind of like a forum where we post things like events that are coming up, or a lot of articles we post on Slack. So we have a guide to the Slack channel with the link to join that if you're interested. It's in the guide. All of these resources I'm listing live on our resources page, which is password protected, and the password is Beyond Plastics right here. So I really highly recommend bookmarking this page because it has everything you need to participate in the local groups and affiliates, including upcoming dates for our training, which is right here at the top of key links. So if you haven't taken the training already, feel free to sign up. The next one's coming up in February. And then if you're thinking of becoming official as a local group or as an affiliate, there's a form to fill out to get added to the map that lives on our website. It's not on this page, but we do have a directory where anybody going to our website can see your group and contact you. And then every meeting at the end, we do a grassroots organizing skill share, usually led by Christina. So we have a YouTube playlist with all those previous skill shares. I'm going to do one tonight because we're covering a lot of material tonight. So that is the important links. And if you have any questions, just DM me in the chat. And now I'm going to say a quick word about an Action Network training coming up next Wednesday. This is totally optional, but if you're interested, feel free. There's going to be more in the future. This is just to get you registered with Action Network. If you're interested in using that tool, it's an online organizing platform that we use for things like petitions and call-in days and letters. And we do provide to our official groups and affiliates a paid Action Network account. And we also provide a paid Zoom account if you're interested in utilizing that. So reach out to Christina at christinadubin@bennington.edu. Okay, quick note before we dive into some policy, which is why we're all here tonight. The Beyond Plastics Local Groups and Affiliates project is turning 1 in February, which is so exciting. We've come so far in the last year, and we have 67 now, as of today, groups and affiliates across the country. So that is incredibly exciting because we're going to be basically directing a national push to get policies that will reduce plastic use and disposal at the source, at every level of government in every corner of the country. So we have a plan for 2023 that utilizes all of the skills that we learned in the training. And if you haven't taken the training yet, that's okay. Take it in February and you'll get all those skills, starting with constituent meetings. So the purpose of tonight's policy issue and policy retreat is to get the basis of knowledge that you need to educate policymakers about real solutions to addressing plastic pollution. All too often, we see policy solutions that are geared at waste management or recycling, which is really important, but it doesn't really get at the heart of the issue of plastic pollution, which is overproduction and use of unnecessary plastics for things like single-use packaging. So we're going to talk about a lot of policies that address that and what you're going to do with them. So in the next 3 months, from the winter into the early spring, we're going to do 3 rounds of constituent meetings. We're asking each group to do a constituent meeting at the local, state, and federal level with your representatives on one of the issues or multiple of these issues that we're presenting tonight. And if you just think for a minute, 67 groups times 3 meetings, that's 100, and that's 201 meetings with representatives across the US. That's extremely powerful in getting the message out there and educating regulators and policymakers on not only what the causes of plastic pollution are, but what the real solutions are, because they're hearing from the American Chemistry Council and the fossil fuel industry every day about false solutions. So please stick with us because beyond those constituent meetings, we have a whole plan for 2023, building up to rallies for Plastic Free July. We did them last year. They were really successful. They got a lot of news coverage and a lot of really great photos. So we hope you'll stick with us, and we'll be there every step of the way with you, providing technical assistance and policy expertise. And speaking of policy expertise, I don't want to shut down any questions. There's going to be time for questions at the end. We just have a really packed agenda. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Jennifer Congdon, who is our deputy director and probably the most experienced policy person besides Jenny on this call, to talk about extended producer responsibility for packaging. Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you so much for that, Alexis. No pressure. I'm sure there are plenty of people here who've done work at the local and state level on policy. Just to let you all know, I did work for 2 governors in New York State on environmental policy. I worked in the governor's office, and I worked on wastewater and clean water infrastructure and coastal policy. And so I have a bunch of years of experience thinking about policy writing, legislation. I like to pretend I'm a lawyer sometimes, even though I'm not one. But I'm here today to talk to you about some of the policies that are certainly coming your way. And if they're not happening in your state, they're probably happening in the state next door. And these are policies that both extended producer responsibility, and I'll get into bottle bill a bit. Extended producer responsibility is something that we didn't plan to get involved in, but it became clear to us that the plastics industry and the packaging industry are on a mission to get really weak EPR passed at the state level. And I'll just give you like a smidge of background. So EPR is extended producer responsibility. And it's the idea that the producers, like the people selling the products on the market, should be responsible for managing the waste at the end of its life. And so right now, you and I, as consumers, residents, whatever, we are taking that waste from our products, we're putting it in our recycling bin or garbage can, and then through our taxes, we pay for that waste to be processed in some way, hopefully recycled, although we know mostly plastics is not. So extended producer responsibility is, it takes that dynamic and flips it on its head. It's not a new concept at all. Europe has been doing extended producer responsibility for packaging for 30 plus years. A lot of other countries around the world do it. Canada, many provinces in Canada do extended producer responsibility for packaging. So we have a lot of information and evidence from around the world to go on already. So one of the things that we've seen, it takes a decade or more to build up the political pressure to do good policy on anything. We've done a great job collectively as a movement, not just Beyond Plastics, at getting policymakers to see that plastic pollution is a problem. And the brands know they have a PR problem right now. And so their goal is to get into state governments and advocate for solutions that don't make them do very much at all. And that's what we're seeing state after state after state around the country. The brands, the chemical industry, the ACC, plastics, all the petrochemical people, they've got lobbyists in every state capital, and they are advocating for a version of extended producer responsibility, which really isn't going to make the changes that we need to happen in order to address plastic pollution. But the kicker is that because it's an entire reconfiguration of our sort of waste economy, if you will, it's going to take 10 years to get the program implemented, ramped up. And so it's going to be 10 years down the road before we get to say, look, it's not working. And frankly, we don't have that time. We don't have that luxury with the plastic pollution crisis because it is here, and every year it gets worse. Every year they're producing more and more plastic, and every year we're seeing larger amounts of plastic in the ocean and more greenhouse gases from plastic production. So what I want to do is walk you through what good extended producer responsibility could look like. And again, one more note on background. So, we saw this coming, and Judith very brilliantly said, we need to get the experts on solid waste management in a room, and we need to dream big. Like, we see these policies popping up and we know it's not going to address the problem. So what do? We need the counter proposal. We need the thing that we can hold up and say, but this is what we should be doing. And so we started this process last summer, 2021. And we've had a couple of iterations of the bill, but the fundamentals have not changed. So let me share my screen. And I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because we have a lot of other policies to get through. And I usually do this presentation in an hour with Q&A just on this presentation. We have other things to talk about. So we all know that the world is ready for single-use plastics to be banned. And so, like I said, the legislators are sort of eager to do something. And our job is to make sure that something is effective. So I talked to you already about the basics of EPR. To dive in just one layer deeper, it's really important for EPR to really center reduction and to center reuse and refill. And I'll get into more detail in a bit on that. So you probably know, some of you may live in a state that has an extended producer responsibility for packaging bill. I'll also say there's lots of other EPR laws on the books in many states, things like electronics, tires, paint, carpets, lots of things lots of products are starting to be covered by extended producer responsibility. But these are the states that have an EPR for packaging law on the books. And I will say that none of them meet the moment. They all fall woefully short of where we need to be in terms of addressing the plastic pollution crisis. So again, because it's going to take 10 years or so to get these programs up and running before they get their first reports out and show, what we already know from Europe is that without reduction targets in the law, you will not see packaging reduction. Europe arguably has a better recycling system than we do. But they have not seen a reduction in packaging over the span of their EPR for packaging programs. So these are the top things that we want to advocate for in any good EPR policy. So first of all, it should require 50% less packaging over 10 years. It's very important to give industry 2-year goals and step them up to 50%. That way they can't, you're not just saying in 10 years, it's 50%. It's every 10% every 2 years. The rest of the packaging should be recycled/recyclable. And the way our model bill puts it is that it puts the requirement on the companies to have 70% of everything they put on the market must be recycled. And that is very strictly defined to mean going back into a product. And the experts tell me that 70% is probably about as high as you can get. You might be able to push it a little bit more, but like there's 30%, again, maybe 25 to 30% like user error. So there are people who just won't recycle. There are people who don't understand recycling. Even with education, you're just not going to reach them. And so probably the most that you could expect them to take back to be responsible for getting back is 70%. The law, right in the law, it should remove it should ban toxics from plastics or from all packaging, but mostly that means it would affect plastics. And that is because not only should our packaging be safer, but also because recycling toxic packaging is just a circle of toxics. It's a toxic circle. So you don't want to just keep that stuff in the system. It can build up over time. And in our model bill, there is a list of toxics that should be eliminated from packaging. Sorry, some of this language is a little bit old. We're no chemical recycling. Right now, we're calling it no false recycling because the industry is constantly shifting what is and what isn't. And so we are redefining this on our terms. So nothing that is more polluting and that is like turning plastic into fuel or burning directly. The law should have strong oversight and accountability. it should take the eco-modulated fees that companies have to pay per package, and it should direct that money for taxpayer relief. That's the extended producer responsibility piece, but also investments in in infrastructure, both for recycling, but really importantly for reduction, reuse, and refill. And then we always recommend that a bottle bill or a deposit return system or a beverage return system, beverage container return system, they should always be enacted either at the same time or actually before extended producer responsibility for packaging. And so if you live in a state that's trying to make a run for extended producer responsibility, you should get in there and voice your concern about if you don't have a deposit return system for beverage containers, you should be advocating for that. And we have lots of support for you. And then always read the legislation to make sure there's no big loopholes. So really, given the scale of the problem, we need to reduce our packaging by at least 50% over the next 10 years. There was a Pew report, it's a really great report done in 2020 called Breaking the Plastic Wave. And it provides a roadmap for what we need to do in order to really head off the worst of the plastics crisis in terms of the ocean impacts. And it's also a feasibility study of what basically what we can do with the technology that we have available. And they recommend overall, they say that we can get to a 47% reduction in plastic usage in total. And so I think a 50% reduction in packaging is well within the realm of reasonable based on that information. You guys, preaching to the choir here, you guys know how bad recycling is for plastics. You know, you can fix the system a bit, but some plastic is just not recyclable. And so a lot of extended producer responsibility for packaging programs focus on recycling. And really, we need to, reduce, reuse, and then recycle. That's the waste hierarchy. And reduce and reuse never get the amount of attention they deserve. And so EPR for packaging we have to start being more bold in our advocacy to do reduction and reuse. So again, the full solid waste hierarchy, it should address reduction and reuse. Another thing that you'll see in some proposals is that it leaves the requirements, reduction numbers and targets, recycling targets, they leave it up to the industry, which is insane. And so really it should be in the legislation. And that's good practice. Companies, what's left that after the 50% reduction, if they need to get 70% of that packaging back over 10 years and there's 30% user error, then all of it needs to be redesigned for recyclability. And that's a good thing. We like to say packaging standards make sense. We have fuel efficiency standards for cars and other vehicles. We have energy efficiency standards for appliances. I don't know if you guys read, there was a story today about how the gas stove is on its way out, thankfully. And so we do this in other places. Packaging should be a place that we as a society should say, no, we need standards for this. It just makes sense. Beyond the standards, you can then use fees that are set at varying levels for different types of packaging to drive industry towards better packaging. So more recyclable and less impact on the environment should pay a lower fee. Again, we must eliminate toxics, and that is true really across the board, but packaging is super important because it's, some of it's food packaging. And if we're going to be turning this stuff into new products through recycling, we can't have toxics in it. Of course, again, no burning, no false recycling. That just does not work. A lot of the chemical recycling, I'll just talk a little bit about this. So chemical recycling, or advanced recycling as the industry calls it, or we're now calling it false recycling. These are mostly facilities that turn plastic waste into fuel to be burned. That's not recycling. For the very small amount of these false recycling solutions that are maybe doing like solvolysis, they're using solvents. There's a ton of toxic and hazardous waste being emitted from these facilities. Let's say, we finally find, we sort of joke around Beyond Plastics, like, oh, it's the unicorn, it's the thing that didn't exist. Let's say it happened, right? Industry was able to come up with the process to turn waste plastic into new plastic. They cannot deal. Municipal solid waste is a whole other beast. So it's a mixed waste stream. It's contaminated. It's just too hard to deal with. So in terms of packaging, we have to stay strong on none of these false solutions that the industry is putting forward. After 2019, many of you know, we've talked to you before, and you probably knew anyway, about China's national sword policy. When China closed its doors to our plastic waste imports, it was a big wake-up call for the US, because we were all happily throwing plastic, well, some of us, in our bins and feeling okay about it. Maybe not great, but that's for therapy later. But we didn't really think about how, like, where was it going? Where is this recycling going? And now it's clear that so much of what we thought or think is being recycled is not being recycled at all. It's languishing in a field somewhere. There are impoverished people around the world picking through the garbage to find the tiny bits that might be recyclable. It's being burned in open pits. I mean, it's a human rights violation, honestly. And so that was a big moment for municipalities and for our recycling systems locally. And many, we got a letter at our house that was like, we're not going to take anything other than 1 and 2 plastics anymore because of this Chinese policy. But really, it was because none of it was actually getting recycled anyway. And we probably shouldn't have been collecting it from the beginning, but it did. The national sword policy actually helped to open people's eyes to what was truly happening to our recycling. So let's dive in a little bit to the bottle bill. So really, these two policies work better together. There's studies from around the world of places that did EPR for packaging alone and places that have EPR for packaging with bottle bill. And it's the rates for return on in the bottle bill places, like the container recycling rates, are so much higher. Jenny Gitlitz, who's on the call, used to work solely on bottle bill. She could probably quote the numbers to you off the top of her head. I can't. You'll just have to believe me that the numbers are way higher. And I think I have a slide later that gets into the details. So on our side of the globe, this is where there are bottle bills, and the US is really ripe for some new bottle bills. Washington State had just put out a bill that may be the first new bottle bill in the country in many years. And there's lots of other places that are looking to expand or create new bottle bills this year. There we go. See, this is, you get better recycling rates. So you can look at the chart on the left, PET, you've got a 63% recycling rate on deposit containers and only a 17% rate achieved under non-deposit containers. Aluminum does better, glass does better. And the bale prices are better for the materials because they're cleaner, because the stream, it's a single stream of recycling, whereas your curbside is mixed and people throw stuff in there that they're not supposed to. And so you get a way better bale price. And so it's a much more valuable recycling stream. And something I learned recently that is fascinating is that the recycled, like, to get recycled content for food grade material, nothing in the bin is clean enough to become food grade material. But bottle bills, actually, you can get, it's so clean, you can get food grade material to replace virgin material for recycled content. So that is kind of an incredible thing. So again, they're better together. It's like a little romance. And when you're doing a bottle bill, I live in New York. I've worked on bottle bill there for years, like since the beginning of my career alongside Judith. And we don't have, we need a modernized bottle bill in New York. And so hopefully we'll be moving with lots of other people, lots of other states around the country in making that happen this year. But new bottle bills and old bottle bills all need to add reuse and refill requirements. And also to make sure all beverage containers are covered under the bottle bill. We have we have access to, and you guys do too, a partner organization of ours called Just Zero has a wonderful model bottle bill, and you guys have access to that. And Jenny Gitlitz on our staff, like I said, has been working on bottle bill for longer than I have, and in a much deeper way. And so if you guys, if there's a bottle bill that's happening in your state, we are happy to jump in and give technical support to you guys as you wade through that. So just to remind everybody, again, sort of preaching to the choir here, this is recycled, this is voluntary commitments from companies versus the reality. It's not enough to have voluntary efforts. We have to start putting this stuff into law in order to change the system. And really strong EPR legislation can help with that. I want to point out for the big loopholes that you really, for EPR for packaging, you should include commercial and residential waste, both. And then this is our favorite big loophole from the California law, or, you know, love to hate it, but it exempts any single-use material that presents a unique challenge in complying with the law. Isn't the point of a system like this to force single-use material that presents unique challenges for recycling? You want to force them out of the market. And that's the whole point of these laws. So let's make sure more of these don't slip in. This is really going to be, there's likely to be lots of litigation around this. I don't think, we share this slide deck with Just Zero. And this gets into the very, very, very weeds. And I don't think you guys need it right now, but I am really happy to walk through any questions that you have on, you know, I will say actually on the needs assessment. So when the system is set up, the state is required to contract with a third party that looks at the recycling and reduction and reuse refill needs and opportunities around the state, and puts together an assessment of what those needs are. And so when the state agency, in our model bill, they contract, actually, let me see if I can just fast forward to, there we go. So there's, in our model bill, we call it a PRO. This is something, a term that's used in lots of other EPR bills, but it usually stands for Producer Responsibility Organization. And usually around the world, traditionally, a PRO has been really like just like an association of all the regulated entities. Like they get together and they figure out the law together, and they implement it together. We used the term PRO so that it was still so that people could understand it, but the role and makeup of the PRO in our system, our recommended model bill and system, is different. So we actually call it a packaging reduction organization. It's not made up of the industry, regulated industry players. It's another third-party nonprofit entity, and that the state contracts with. And they do work with the producers, but they're not controlled by the producers. And they collect and compile data. They collect the fees from the producers, and they distribute funds based on the needs assessment that's done. And then they also offer technical support to producers, especially small businesses who may need help in complying with the law. And then they do education and outreach to the public so that the public knows about the new law and the changes, and they can help educate the public on what is recyclable and how to recycle things. So producers in our system must register with the PRO, the Packaging Reduction Organization, and they start making payments. Those payments are based on the what the agency puts them in regulation. So that's set in regulation. So the fees have to cover all of how much the system costs. So part of what the needs assessment does is looks at the entire recycling system in the state and says, these are all the costs. Like every municipality is paying this much money for collection, transport, management, all of that for packaging materials, which is mostly what's in your bin. Also the fees must cover enforcement, the administration of the program by the environmental agency, their own administration, the PRO's own administration of the program, and any costs associated with promulgating rules. I think, for those of you who have done policy work at the state level, you know that environmental agencies around the country are sort of beleaguered, underfunded, and aren't really looking to take on new roles, and especially not to do it in a way that's not funded. And so the design of this bill seeks to meet both of those challenges. Back to the producer payments. So the fee structure would be set in regulation by the Department of Environmental Conservation or Protection, whatever your environmental agency is called in your state. And the fees are based on the amount of packaging that a company puts on the market and the type of packaging material that they're using. So, by the way, those are, I don't know if you guys saw that story about a woman, an artist who did this project where she froze water from various lakes and rivers near her home full of plastic pollution into popsicle shapes, and did this whole like photo essay. It was kind of incredible. So the distribution of the money is really important. Again, it's going to go towards all of that stuff we talked about before, covering all of the administrative costs. But then, the payments to the local governments and recyclers for their work. And then really importantly, there's going to be money for reduction and recycling grants through this program. And these are the criteria for those grants. It would really truly be things that are going to increase reuse and refill infrastructure and improve recycling in the state. So we talked about all of these earlier: packaging reduction 50% over 10 years, packaging recycling 70% over 12 years, and eliminating toxics. Our bill has lots of ways to enforce the bill. One of the things we struggle with in New York, and I think in other places, is actually just enforcing the laws on the books. And so our model bill has a citizen suit provision that allows citizens to bring a lawsuit against companies that are bad actors. And then audits, because it's important to have oversight. And so that's in there. And I always like to end this with a little bit of hope about what kinds of systems are out there already, what kind of packages or packaging is out there already that we can shift to. And if we just have the law on the books that's pushing these kinds of things, this would be the norm and not the exception. So, for certain products, we can just skip packaging altogether. There's innovative packages out there that use really, truly biodegradable materials. Lots of refill and reuse systems out there for different products. Deodorant is a common one. Toothpaste is another one that we're seeing a lot of. Regional bottle washing facilities. That's something that the grants coming out of this EPR program could fund for like wineries or breweries to get together and actually have like a similar bottle or the same bottle that they share, and you do reuse and refill infrastructure. And by the way, you would need a bottle bill with a deposit on those to make it work. There's mail back programs. Lots of our staff like this stuff because it's kind of all that's out there right now. But we really need to get reuse and refill into stores where people are buying their stuff. So this is an example of that in England. You literally walk into the store, grab one of the bottles that are there at the kiosk, you fill it up with whatever it is that you're buying, you pay for it, and then you bring it back to the store and you drop it off, and it's washed and put back out for the next person to use. Mail, again, the home delivery of reuse refill products. One of the things I love about this company, Blue Land, is that they actually they do a lot of compressed tablets. And they don't use any polyvinyl alcohol, PVA, in their formulations, which is actually a form of plastic. And when you take the water out, you make shipping so much lighter than shipping, laundry or dish detergent with all the water in it. These are paper-based packages, just truly recyclable. They can go right in a recycling bin like paper. Truly recyclable. Paperboard, again, same. Oh, the dreaded berry clamshells. It's like a constant struggle in my house because my kids always want berries and I only buy them in the summer because they're local and not in plastic. So, it's important to pay attention to the details, It's important to have an open and transparent process. Sunshine is the best disinfectant for any political struggle. Ask your legislators to have hearings, let people testify and talk about, what this means to them and how they see the program shaping up. So with that, I will stop. I'm sure you guys your brains are exploding. Do you want to go right through, Alexis, or am I going to take questions?
I think we may have to save questions at the end, but could you just talk briefly about the state policy landscape for EPR and what people should look out for?
Yes. There are a number of states that are already getting EPR, like it's happening, like they've been working on it over the fall, the summer. Do you want me to list them out? I can probably do it. I may miss a few, but so Washington State, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, New York, New Jersey,
Maryland, Rhode Island.
Yeah, Rhode Island,
Massachusetts,
Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont-ish.
Hawaii,
right. I forgot to start in the Pacific. Okay. Anybody I think you've got some people doing bag ban stuff down in New Mexico, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's it. So if you're in one of those states, there's stuff happening. And there's coalitions at work, and we can help get you hooked into those coalitions. Nothing in Tennessee.
No, Tennessee is working on one, but nothing in the South that I've heard of.
Right, Tennessee, right. I nearly forgot about that one. So anywhere that this is happening is really, it's important to interject and get involved. And again, it's a complex policy, but we can help you with it. What we like, we can be the policy experts that you pull in for hearings. We have a great fact sheet that you can use. We can read bills and analyze it for you, but you guys are the grassroots. You have the contacts and connections. And so we have to partner on this. We aren't, we have, you guys are our chapters sort of in each state. We don't have staff in each state. So if you have the bandwidth to work on these and you live in one of these states, that's super important.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Like Jennifer said, this is one of the biggest policy issues that we're facing in 2023. The state level is where it's at this year. That is where all the major movement on policy is happening and where things are likely to pass or not pass. So that's why we're starting off tonight's meeting. Yes, go ahead, Jennifer. I
want to reiterate that, like, I want to put a really fine point on it. So you guys probably watched Judith testify for the US Senate in December. And we just received, like 2 weeks ago, we got a series of questions from the US Senate, follow up to the testimony. And we just wrapped up our responses today and submitted them. We'll post them on our website at some point soon. But one of the things the US Senate focused on is what policies exist at the state level that are already working. That was like a huge question of theirs and asked in 3 different ways. And then it was like, which of those policies could work at the federal level? So we have to prove at the state level that we have to get these things done and prove that they work. And then the federal government is going to be ready to make them happen nationwide. But we have to, in this work, there's a saying that the states are the laboratories for public policy. And that is incredibly, it's as true today as it ever has been. So it's really important to get these things done at the state level. We're going to continue to work at the federal level. You know, we play whack-a-mole. We make sure that industry is not trying to get deregulated, which they are. And so we work to step in on that. There's, you know, we have different levers that we pull there, but the state level work was where the action is at.
Yes, so now we're going to go into the other major state level issue that we're facing in 2023. And then we're going to cover some local issues with Christina, and I'll finish up with the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act and some infrastructure. We're going to do our best to finish by 8:30. Thank you again, Jennifer. We can take questions at the end if you want to stay later, but you are also free to go. So Jennifer mentioned chemical recycling in the definition of recycling for EPR. And can somebody put the spotlight on me, please, Christina or Jennifer? So let's talk about chemical recycling. Let's dig in a little deeper on what it is. So we all know that almost all plastics are made from fossil fuels, and increasingly they are made from ethane, which is a hydrofraced gas. Mostly ethane is being turned into polyethylene for single-use packaging. So it all ties in together. We know that we have a massive production problem. Production is increasing exponentially. I've heard different projections. I've heard it'll double by 2050. I've heard it'll triple by 2060. Either way, this is an unsustainable graph. And as I just said, most of that production is for increases in single-use packaging. So this all ties in back to EPR. But where chemical recycling comes in is that we know plastics recycling doesn't work. And so Big Plastic, which is the petrochemical industry, the American Chemistry Council, is trying to convince policymakers that they can fix recycling with chemical recycling or advanced recycling, which Jennifer called false recycling. So we already know that production and disposal is a major environmental justice issue, and chemical recycling is as well. Chemical recycling is trash burning 2.0 or waste burning 2.0. This is the next generation of incineration, and I will explain why. So advanced recycling, chemical recycling, false recycling, it's a series of technologies that do not actually recycle plastic into new materials. What it does, for the most part, is turn plastic into low-grade fossil fuels that are then burned, and there's also some combustion happening during the process itself. So those technologies are called solvolysis, pyrolysis, gasification, methanolysis. Pyrolysis and gasification are the two biggest ones, and solvolysis uses chemicals, and I'll explain a little bit what these technologies do. So basically, pyrolysis and gasification, they are superheating plastics in what the industry claims is an oxygen-deprived chamber. So this is significant because the Clean Air Act, the landmark federal bill for federal law for regulating air pollution, defines an incinerator as any facility which combusts any solid waste. That is an incinerator under the Clean Air Act and must be regulated as an incinerator. Pyrolysis and gasification, the chemical industry claims, is not incineration because there's no oxygen in the chamber, meaning there's no combustion because there's no oxygen, it can't burn. But the fact is, scientifically, unless they're on the moon or in a completely hyperbaric chamber, there's always going to be some oxygen in the chamber, which will result in combustion, which meets the definition of an incinerator under the Clean Air Act. And the Clean Air Act does, in fact, define pyrolysis and gasification as incineration. And this will be significant when I get to the state level issues that we're seeing. Now, solvolysis and methanolysis, I don't know as much about methanolysis, but solvolysis uses toxic solvents to basically dissolve the plastics. And all of these processes are located in low-income communities and communities of color or environmental justice communities, and they produce large amounts of hazardous waste. They also undermine waste reduction. So it's not substituting new recycled materials for virgin materials. This is really just PR to allow an ever-increasing expansion in plastic production. That hasn't stopped the American Chemistry Council from convincing the news media and policymakers that this is the solution to the plastic crisis. We have seen headline after headline after headline claiming that these processes will fix recycling when we know that that is not the case. And I'll come back to this number in a minute. So as Jennifer mentioned, with that awesome graph about consumer brands and their promises for post-consumer recycled content, major brands want to work with chemical manufacturers to get chemically recycled plastic to meet their promises, their voluntary promises for post-consumer recycled content. The problem is these facilities are not turning plastic into plastic, they are turning it into fuels, which the European Commission does not define as recycling. It says that waste to fuel does not count as recycling, but the United States does not have such a set definition. Now, here's some of the climate problems with these processes, and I love these slides from Gaia, the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. They are really the leading organization on this issue. So fossil fuels in the form of plastics go into chemical recycling facilities. And if it's a pyrolysis facility, a gasification facility, they're adding energy to that process. So they are creating emissions just by the energy that they need to run the process. And then as they're heating the plastic, much of the carbon that is stored in the plastic is released into the atmosphere. So only a small amount of product is actually produced from the process. There, for example, in New Mexico, there's a gasification pilot plant called Plastic Gas in Los Lunas. And in that plant, for every 10 tons of plastic waste that goes in, 1 ton of fuel oil is produced. So this is very inefficient, and all the while it's releasing greenhouse gas emissions. And Gaia estimates that those emissions are 2.5 to 3 times the weight of the plastic that goes in. Another concern is toxics. So plastic contains a lot of toxic chemicals. They don't just go nowhere in the chemical recycling process. They are either released as air emissions, water effluent, or they result in the fuels that are created, which are then burned, and so the toxics are released when the fuels are burned. So I say that because just to go back to the plastic gas facility, if 10 tons of plastic are going in and only 1 ton of fuel is coming out, where did the other 9 tons go? It was released as air pollution or as water effluent or as hazardous waste. So the toxics is a really concerning part about chemical, and I will circle back to that when I get to the state legislation. So just to sum up, this is a complicated problem, and I'm sorry I had to rush through it. Chemical recycling, false recycling, advanced recycling, it's not recycling and it's not circular. It's very polluting and toxic. There's little to no transparency about what is happening inside of these facilities. And of course, we cannot recycle our way out of this problem, as we already know. So going back to this headline, major brands call for 800,000 metric tons of chemically recycled plastic by 2030. That's only 1.6% of all plastic waste being generated in the US. So even if this process worked, even if chemical recycling worked, it would not do anything to help the plastic crisis. And that's because we are continuing to produce new plastic. Most major environmental groups agree that chemical recycling is incineration or false recycling. And as Jennifer said, there are nuances with the types of technology and the language used, but I would direct people to the Natural Resources Defense Council report on this matter, which is linked in the agenda. It's called Recycling Lies. It's a really good report. It's short, but it will tell you everything you need to know about chemical recycling. And of course, I love this slide from Gaia because I think it just sums it up really well. Here's the report from NRDC. Please read it. It's eye-opening, to say the least. But let's talk about legislation, because that's what we're here tonight to talk about, policy. So 20 states have already passed legislation to promote chemical recycling, and I call it plastic burning, but with solvolysis, again, the language is nuanced, but let's say chemical recycling. And more states are promoting this false solution every year. So the way they are doing this, I mentioned that chemical recycling, gasification, and pyrolysis are regulated under the Clean Air Act as incinerators. States are taking it upon themselves to exempt these facilities from state level regulations that apply to incinerators. So that's significant. They are also taking steps to exempt plastic waste from solid waste regulations. And the way they do that is through definitions. So these state level laws and bills that are being introduced literally define, say that plastic waste shall not be defined as waste, it shall be defined as feedstock. And they say that chemical recycling facilities shall not be defined as incinerators, they shall be defined as manufacturing. So by saying this isn't incineration, this isn't plastic waste, even though it is, they're basically exempting them from the oversight that applies to the state level oversight that applies to incinerators and that applies to solid waste. Third, a lot of these policies, and this also happens at the local level, will provide subsidies or public funds for chemical recycling facilities. A major example is in Macon, Georgia. Last year, Brightmark, a chemical recycling company, received a promise of $500 million from the city to build a facility. Now, activists were able to get the mayor to withdraw from that agreement, and the whole project collapsed. But that's just one example of how inefficient these facilities are cost-wise. A better thing to do would be to just stop making plastic. So solutions, and here's what we're asking folks to look out for, is to prevent pro-chemical recycling bills at the state level. We don't want any more of these bills passing. We have one in New York, unfortunately, that we are working to stop, to not get reintroduced. Introduce a preemptive ban on chemical recycling, and we are working as fast as we can on a model bill that would do this, that we can provide you to give to your state legislators. And 3, address chemical recycling and EPR policy. This slide is from Jennifer's slide deck. Strong and transparent EPR can be used to solve the problem, and we can use our 10 principles of effective EPR to say that chemical recycling, advanced recycling, false recycling, gasification, pyrolysis, methanolysis, solvolysis, whatever you call it, will not count as recycling. So we can address this in EPR, but we also need to look out for in EPR bills that promote chemical recycling. So that's another concern. I won't play this video because we don't have time, but these slides are linked in the agenda. Okay, before we go on to local legislation, any questions on chemical recycling or extended producer responsibility? How do I find out more about the specific legislation in Illinois that promotes chemical recycling? Jordan, I don't know if you're on here, but if you know those bill numbers for that law, could you drop it in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you.
Will you be, could I ask, will you be sending us a recording of this? Because there's so much information here, it's very, very hard to keep up with. Are you going to send a recording?
I understand. Yes.
No, I'm not, it's not a criticism. It's wonderful information, but I don't want to lose it. So
yes,
can you send us a, okay.
We will send the recording, and also linked in the agenda are our slides. I've linked the Natural Resources Defense Council report, linked our model EPR bill, and a legislative fact sheet from Safer States also. And there's tons of resources on EPR. But I would encourage everyone to read that Natural Resources Defense Council report and read our model bill on EPR to really become an expert. Okay, moving right along.
Ryan, on that map, local recycling, what did the green ball, the red symbol stand for?
Oh, on that map, there were multiple policies on that map. So the green bottle is bottle bill states, and the red symbol is EPR policy that has passed. Okay. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to Christina Dubin, our community organizer, to talk about plastic bans and skip the stuff.
All right. So I am going to share our Beyond Plastics bill, and this is our go big or go home, but you can separate each portion out, and I'm going to dive deeper on the bag portion. But first, just to overview, this bill bans polystyrene in terms of disposable food or beverage packaging. So that includes a nice long list: bowl, cartons, clamshells, cup, plates, lids, straws, trays, utensils, any other item that's going to be used, is a single-use item to aid in the transport of food to mouth or otherwise. Also, any packaging used to contain foods and beverages that are for takeout and leftovers as well. It also bans polystyrene packaging material products like peanuts or any other of those foam polystyrene sheets that are going to be used to protect whatever the item is. It bans plastic bags and puts a fee on paper. And again, I'll go into depth on bags. It makes straws, stir sticks, and splash guards upon request only. So the food service provider doesn't ask, the customer needs to request them. It also limits the intentional release of balloons, limits that only to those that are for scientific use or hot air balloons that are going to be recovered afterwards. And just a note that both New Jersey and Vermont have taken the trifecta approach, banning straws, bags, and polystyrene all in one fell swoop. So it can be done at the state level, but also at the local level. As Jennifer said earlier, with our model bills, you're going to adapt these for your use, and we're here to help you with that. So, you're on the ground, who the champion is to help you usher it through, and then we can support you with all the resources to build support and tweak the policy. So let's just make sure I'm on the right thing here. Okay, so this is just a landscape of states that have bag laws. There are 9, 10 if you count Hawaii, since all counties there have a ban. There are over 550 local bag laws in 28 states as of 2021. And Washington, D.C. doesn't have a ban, but they do have a fee on plastic bags. And I'm using 2 screens, so I apologize. Might go past my slide here. This is a matrix of those 9 states, and I'll just take us quickly through the columns here. So in that first column, you will see an X if the state has a ban of plastic single-use bags. In the next column, you'll see an X if mils are used in the definition, and that's a measurement of thickness, 1/1000th of an inch. And this is not in our model, and we do not recommend having it in a bag bill, and I'll get into why. The third column is, you'll only see an X for New Jersey because they're the only state that has included paper bags in the ban. The fourth column indicates what the fee is on paper, if there is one. And the fifth column indicates what the fee is for a reusable bag, if there is one. Again, our model does not does not include a fee on reusable bags, and I can get into that. The last column shows where that fee goes, which you'll see here is overwhelmingly to the retailer to cover the extra cost of paper or reusable bags. So our model is pretty close to Colorado in terms of, banning single-use plastic film bags and putting a 10-cent fee on paper. And we do have a different split, so that's different. We know that bottle bills work, and we know that good bag laws work. So you could go to plasticbaglaws.org and find a link to a bunch of, it's actually a global collection of efficacy studies, but I'll just throw out the caveat that that's not being updated anymore. We can also help you track down studies, specific ones if you need them. But I just wanted to share two examples, one state and one local. So New Jersey's law went into effect this past May 2022, and a sample of 160 grocery stores showed a reduction in single-use paper bags, because they banned paper, from 1.1 million per month to 0, and a reduction in single-use plastic bags from 55 million per month to 0. In Suffolk County, New York, after implementing a fee on both paper and plastic bag usage decreased 82%. So that was 1.1 billion fewer plastic bags in the year 2018. And paper bags usage decreased 79%. So that's significant. And grocery store observation studies also showed that there was an increase in customers going bagless or bringing reusable bags, going from 28 to 60%. And a 42% decrease in plastic bag litter, and similarly, a similar decrease in bag litter on shorelines was observed as well. Now, some of you will not be able to go for a bag ban, right? Because you're in a state that has preemption. So preemption's when there's a higher authority of law, such as a state displaces a lower authority of law, like a municipality. And, we also refer to these as ban on ban states. These can be hidden in recycling laws, like in Delaware, and block, they have language in them that blocks local fees from being used in the future. So be watchful, watch what bills are coming up and read them thoroughly to see, if anything in there is a little suspect. But that doesn't mean that you can't do something. You can work on a Skip the Stuff campaign, which it's a great way to make headway in states where there isn't the political will or it isn't legal to pass these bans. All it says is that restaurants or food service providers cannot give a customer any single-use accessory items, like the ones you see pictured here, unless the customer asks for them. That's it. There's also language to ensure that online ordering systems like DoorDash or Uber Eats are opt-in when it comes to accessories. So you got to click that little box if you want, soy sauce packets or utensils. A lot of, obviously takeout increased with the pandemic, and, a lot of this takeout is going home, right, where people have all these items. So we have a toolkit that directs you to the Just Zero model bill, also to Upstream Solutions, full Skip the Stuff toolkit, lots of assets in there. We also put up a few great case studies, happy to get more if you need them, and our good old fact sheets. So without, as with any campaign, any initiative, we're an email, phone call, or a Zoom away. How's that for short and sweet?
That was perfect, Christina. Thank you. And thank you for talking slowly and kind of slowing us down and slowing the heart rate down.
Sorry, guys.
No, it's not you, Jennifer. I talk fast too, and I get really excited. So We have just a couple more things to cover, but want to take any questions on plastic bag bans and skip the stuff before we move on. Oh, there's a question about a plastic bag fee as an interim step. Jenny, do you want to take that on?
I mean, I would just say we don't recommend it, because what often happens with fees is the entity that receives the fees becomes dependent on those fees. And so they become invested in keeping that item in circulation. And with plastic bags, they really just need to go. And so I don't recommend a fee as the first step for plastic bags.
Right. And to add to what Jennifer said, as I just typed into the chat box, if a ban, I would question the idea that a ban isn't realistic to begin with, because as Alexis pointed out, there are over 500 examples around the country, and more being passed all the time. And I know just from my own small town in Dalton, Massachusetts, we couldn't get a ban passed the first year we tried it, but we just waited a year and we built more support and we got it passed the second year. And so I think that there are many examples to refer to of success stories. And it just may take a little while. So I agree with what Jen said.
There's a question in the chat and I realized I forgot to talk about, I totally skipped over a whole slide, you guys. Is it okay if I go back, or do you want to just?
Yeah, let's go back.
Okay.
And Jennifer Clark, what's your question?
Can I just add one more thing to the thing about it being realistic? Oceana did a poll in 2022 that showed that 81% of US voters across party lines want government to take action on reducing single-use plastics.
Yeah.
Yes, very true.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jennifer Clark.
Okay. In talking about fees, that brings to mind our desire to ask our local retailers to use fees on vegetable or produce bags. What do you think of that?
As part of a bigger bag ban?
Oh, this is not law. This is advocacy to the retailers. We are not seeking a law on this right now.
And so you don't have a broader bag ban where you
We
live?
do.
Oh,
We
you
do. But we don't on produce bags.
Right, yeah, they're often left out of bag bans. We just, as we were redrafting this, had lots of debate about that. I think if your community feels ready for that step, I think that could be a good policy. You could also start with the, with a lot of the plastic bag stuff, it was like the store would give you 5 cents if you brought your own. And so maybe going that route would be effective.
Right.
I don't have a definitive answer. It's kind of like, it's just a gut instinct thing on this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So apologies, I literally blew right by my deep dive on bags. Oh my gosh, it's been a long day. So I just want to point out quickly the lessons learned and why we've included certain things in our model. So I had mentioned not including a thickness. You can look to California, you can look to Austin, Texas, and other places where, where you see those mils, right? If it's over 2.5 mils, it's a reusable bag. And the problem is it's causing these slightly thicker plastic bags that are being used, and they're not really any more reusable than the slightly thinner version, and they're ending up as litter, and they're the same issues happening. So that's why we don't have that in our model. Also, someone in the chat had said something about enforcement. So often, DES or DEC or DEP, whatever the environmental state agency is, they don't have a lot of resources. So having a local government entity, you know, the entity that handles the recycling local laws, be there for the enforcement piece is going to help a lot. They can be more proactive. So often at the, you know, with the state agencies, it's people reporting that a place is non-compliant. So those local agencies could be more proactive. And then we talked about the fee on paper, which also helps to address this third-party shopper issue, like Instacart. So you may have seen that in New Jersey, people are getting, you know, the small percentage of people that were getting these home deliveries had the bags piling up because Instacart was not taking them back, and they had plenty of time to prepare to comply with the law, and they just didn't. We put in specific language to prevent that from happening. Again, it's probably not going to be an issue unless you ban paper in addition to plastic bags. And then I just wanted to throw up our reusable bag definition for you all to read, making sure that we just added all these safeguards to make sure that it's not going to be a plastic film bag, a non-woven plastic bag. And, you know, one of the important ones is that it can go in the washing machine, it's machine washable. And I believe we're staying with this, that it can also be placed in the dryer. So Canada did that. And that's just, yeah, Jennifer says yes. So, so those are just the safeguards to make sure that these bags don't end up being just as bad and not true reusable bags. And I think that's that.
Thank you, Christina. And thank you everyone for sticking with us. We're in the home stretch now. I'm going to make an executive decision here and say, let's save the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act for next month's meeting. This bill is being rewritten and it will be reintroduced with a new House sponsor this year because U.S. Representative Lowenthal has retired. So we'll save that for next month because I want to make sure we have enough time for infrastructure to talk about plastic that is being used in roads, turf, and pipes. So first I'll invite our Bennington Fellow, Shaden, to please come forward. Are you still here? Amazing. Would you mind just introducing yourself and talk a little bit about the research you've done about plastic and asphalt?
Yeah, so hi, I'm a Bennington College student. I'm a sophomore and I'm studying psychology and architecture here. So I did a little bit of research on infrastructure and use of plastic in infrastructure like pipes and also a plastic asphalt, which I will share and with you guys. So one of the most important things nowadays is trying to figure out how to manage the waste and the plastic waste are happening right now in the world. And a lot of companies, associations, and departments are looking for ways to like use plastic. One of the ways that they have found out of using plastic and kind of making more sustainable future is using plastic asphalt. Throughout the research that I did, most of the articles that were looking into plastic asphalt, they were like more looking at the positive aspect of plastic asphalt because in the articles it says like it is financially beneficial and it could economically help, and it's sustainable because it reduces waste. So it takes the waste and creates a mixture with asphalt and you can use it as the pavements of the streets. And they're also looked into it that it's lasts longer and it could be more safer for the drivers. And there's so many companies like the DOW, which is based in California, and Microbrewer, which is based in UK and also works in US, and also NPA or APA, which is based in Florida. They all produce plastic asphalt, and they, most of the times their website is like looking in the positive aspects of it. And I could find very little articles that talk about the negative part of using plastic asphalt, and it's not really looking into that plastic asphalts in future terms can create chemicals that could be harmful for the environment. In one of the articles that we were looking at, it was talking about an Missouri a Department of Transportation. They were doing a collaboration with the university to create plastic asphalt, and they were trying to look into how they can use plastic asphalt. And in their idea, they didn't want to test it out in the labs. They kind of wanted to experiment it in real life situation to see if it's, economically beneficial, if it's going to be sustainable, and how it could help the environment. The new federal legislation and programs have also been very supportive of this kind of movement, because the government is kind of committed to using sustainable materials and look for ways to create more sustainable way of helping the waste in the world. And there's a lot of pilot projects that are using more than one type of plastics and experimenting to see which one is going to be helpful. And they are looking deeply into seeing if these plastic asphalts are going to cause microplastics and it's going to be harmful for the environment. And they're really looking into different mixtures that could help while using plastic. Kind of when in the article is kind of comparing the plastic asphalt, which is a mixture of plastics, and the traditional asphalt, which is sand, stone, gravel, and waste product from oil. And you kind of can see from the traditional asphalt, it is more harmonical with the environment.
I'm just going to cut in here real quick, Shadan, and just emphasize the point you made about how these articles are looking at these supposed benefits, such as cost effectiveness, sustainability, but they're not necessarily looking at the negatives. So a lot of these companies that are pushing plastic and asphalt, like Dow, have a vested interest in generating new plastic materials. So they are the types of companies that are also looking for ways to deal with that waste. That is not a policy to reduce plastic at the source. So let me put this into context here for folks. We have a lot of articles that are quoting state departments of transportation and these chemical companies saying that plastic and asphalt is cost effective, is sustainable, is safe. But that's not necessarily the case, because, as Shadan said, they're not testing this in laboratories. They are testing this in real time on the roads. So this is really a interesting issue that we don't put a lot of resources into, but I would encourage everyone to pay attention to. There's a really good article linked in the agenda called from Maryland Matters called Plastic Asphalt is Paved with Good Intentions, I think it's called. So one of the huge concerns that pops out to me is abrasion on these plastic roads. So there's been studies looking at microplastics in the air and microplastics that fall in rain that have found that there are thousands of tons of microplastics circulating in the atmosphere. And one theory is that how these microplastics get there is from synthetic rubber that's in tires. So a lot of tires are made of plastic. And the mechanical abrasion of tires on the road can generate microplastics that then go into the jet stream and then fall back down to the earth. So we have this same concern with plastic and asphalt. And I think the point that Shadan is showing here is that there's no critical look at plastic and asphalt. There's very few departments of transportation, or I haven't seen any, that are actually saying, wait a minute, should we actually do this because of the microplastic concerns? They're putting plastic in roads and then looking at the effects and then looking for microplastics in the water. So that's a concern, and also the chemicals that are in the plastic itself that could be leaching into the water. So thank you, Shaden, for sharing your research with us. I think that really also just highlights our need for writing letters to the editor and op-eds to counteract this messaging that putting plastic in roads, in infrastructure is cost effective and sustainable, because we know that it's really just spreading the toxics into the environment. And now we're gonna go to, I will invite Diane Wolke. Are you still here? To talk about plastic turf.
I'm here.
Okay. Diane Wolke with Safe, Healthy Playing Fields. Please tell us what's going on with plastic in artificial turf.
Yale released some research that was done with other research from researchers from around the globe, looking specifically at policy and regulation. It looked at documents from the EU, the UK, the US, Canada, China, Qatar, and the Global Stockholm Convention of the United Nations. Essentially, there isn't a whole lot of regulation, the long and short of it. Studies have looked primarily at the used tire crumb that is used in synthetic turf fields, 97% of turf fields, as well as playground surfacing. The people that are looking at the blades and the carpet backing are largely academic researchers. We're eagerly awaiting some research to come out very soon, we're hoping. There have been other studies that have looked at, the studies that have looked at the used tire crumb are the US EPA, together with the CDC, and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. Their first part of their study was released in 2019. It was very quickly rebutted by PEER, the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, and the Ecology Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for not following their own research guidelines and de-emphasizing toxicity, which it doesn't even, their studies don't even address human exposures to the chemicals. The CPSC was also part of this FRAP 1, it's called. They contracted actually with University of Cincinnati to do a risk assessment. They only looked at 9 chemicals in playground surfaces. The California Office for Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, which is one of the 4 branches of California EPA, was also consulted by the EPA, the US EPA. They started their study in 2015. They still have not completed it. They did release a draft assessment, a draft report in May of 2019, and they did list all 126 chemicals that they found in used tire crumb. The US EPA, I believe, found 355 chemicals. Yale had found, I believe, 306 chemicals, most of which are classified as either toxic or carcinogenic, but between the US EPA and ECHA, which is the European Chemicals Agency. Let's see here, trying to keep this short here. New York just passed the country's first carpet EPR bill. It does include a ban on PFAS, and it does include artificial turf. I was afraid that artificial turf got pulled out of the final draft because none of the post-signing of the legislation reports mention synthetic turf, but in fact, NRDC did confirm that it's in there. I thank you, Christina, for sending me the copy of the final draft as it was signed by Governor Hochul. It did get pushed out for 2 years, so this isn't going to go into effect until December 31st of 2025. They want to see carpet recycling move from 1%, which is the current in New York State, to getting up towards 75%. I do have some unofficial information from NRDC. They think this will be the end of synthetic turf in New York because they can't get the PFAS out of it. So there's hope on that horizon. In California, because we have three different bills in which there is a ban preventing banning of synthetic turf, we're moving towards regulation. And I've mentioned this before, the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, another one of the four arms of the California EPA, is going to be opening public comments very soon. I've sent them emails and haven't had a response yet about what the expected date is. They've also changed the wording. It's gone from PFAS in synthetic turf to synthetic turf screening. I think that may be an indication that they're going to incorporate additional chemicals. There was a suggestion of that in their 2021 to 2023 work plan, that if there was time and money, that they would incorporate additional chemicals. We do know that there are UV inhibitors, there are flame retardants, there are myriad other chemicals that go into these, all of which have all tested positive for PFAS. So Kathy is going to talk for a couple seconds about a couple moments about what's going on in Maryland. Kathy?
Given the time, I will, it may be, well, maybe a little more than a few seconds, but so Maryland has been, was early, thanks to a lot of the Safe Healthy Playing Fields and Sierra Club activists, was early on trying to get regulate synthetic turf by stopping the funding for it, which was not, just didn't happen. So what Maryland is doing at the moment, well, there's two lanes going on here, but what we're doing is trying to create a tracing and tracking system, as Jane Dow just mentioned in the chat. What happens to artificial turf that already exists? There is nothing to be done at this point with artificial turf. It's a mixed plastic that's full of all sorts of toxins. And Diane mentioned all of the studies that for the tire crumb part of it, that's the infill, that have found hundreds of different toxic substances. And I believe none of those studies found one of the recent most toxic ones, which is the 6-ppd quinone, which is responsible for killing almost 100% of the salmon runs, coho salmon runs in the Northwest. So I always liken it to a Pandora's box. Every time you open it up, something else bad flies out. So it's just a bad in many ways. So what we're trying to do in Maryland is at least make, what I always say is, make the invisible visible to people. They don't realize how much synthetic turf waste, synthetic turf fields are out there. Adults don't see it even when they see it because it's green. They don't realize it's plastic and not grass. It's only the kids and the athletes who play on it who have to suffer the exposures and the heat and the injuries. The adults just see something that looks pretty on television or pretty on Friday nights when they're watching their kids play. But with this tracing and tracking bill, it will create a system where it will be tracked from where it's installed to every point along the way, which is usually ends up to be a landfill, or it ends up being dumped. Hopefully this will prevent it from being dumped on sides of mountains, which have happened, and in ravines, shipped to Malaysia, another thing that happened, or dumped by the side of streams. So once again, the transparency hopefully will help bring accountability, and when the full cost of disposing of the stuff, which is not recyclable, becomes apparent, that will hopefully also stop the the installation because the disposal costs will be so high. The other track related to New York, we had tried to get synthetic turf into the Maryland PFAS bills related to carpeting, and were not successful because they thought it would kill the bill. But now that New York has already taken the bull by the horns and successfully included synthetic turf in their bill, and that bill is looking at both regulating both the recycling and PFAS content, we're hoping in Maryland to be able to follow suit. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're working a lot of different angles. I know a lot of you are out there as well, doing the same thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Diane. It's so hard to go last because we take all your time. Thank you so much. So we're going to wrap here, and I'm just going to reiterate that this is the kickoff to these constituent meetings. So I believe, Alexis, that we're starting with the local constituent meeting first. And so we'll scaffold that at our next monthly meeting. And if you have any questions that we didn't get to, please email Alexis or I. We have in the agenda, we've linked that list of resources. Jennifer, your slides aren't linked in there yet, I don't think, but I'm assuming we can pop those in there. Yes. And I believe that's it. So thank you all for coming out and holding on. A lot of people stayed till the end, so really appreciate it. We always try to pack a lot in. We have high hopes of getting it all in.
I would just add quickly, you don't need to wait till the next meeting to start scheduling constituent meetings. Your state legislature is in session right now. So now is the time to reach out to your state representatives and also your House and Senate leaders to talk to them about expanded producer responsibility and chemical recycling, and also, of course, your local representatives. So start scheduling constituent meetings, and we'll follow up with more info in the follow-up email to this call. And I think we can stick around for questions. I'll stick around for a few minutes.
I
If
can
there's
stick
any.
around. Yeah, if there are any questions on EPR, I can, battle bill, etc., I can stick around.
We can also talk about this at future meetings because I know everyone's tired and it's Wednesday, 1/11. Cool. Okay, I think we'll end the Zoom then if there's no questions. Look for the follow-up in your inbox tomorrow with this recording. And just thank you everyone for sticking with us tonight. And thanks to our presenters. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Night, thank you.